Chapter 27 is called Eschatology and Identity. And fundamentally, I try and contrast two different ways of understanding who we are in the world. The first is one of the dominant ways in late modernity, in our contemporary culture. And what do I call it here? I call it late modern identity as commodified possession. And I draw this from an idea made popular by a guy called C.B. Macpherson, who wrote a book called Possessive Individualism, where he takes Hobbes and Locke and he shows how, especially in Locke actually, and he tries to project it back onto Hobbes, I digress. In Locke, there's this idea that we own ourselves, we are a property of ourselves, and therefore we can, and this is sort of the way that Macpherson begins to spin it out, that we can create and curate ourselves because we own ourselves. This is an idea that's been taken up by lots of other people, and the idea of possessive individualism has really caught on and become quite a powerful motif in modern political philosophy and cultural critique. And I think there's a lot going for it, that we see ourselves as our own possession to do with as we will. And it also commodifies identity. I become a product. And we see this in a lot of language, don't we, around identity? How many times have you been invited to go on a course of personal branding? I've lost count. They're offered all over on the internet. My university offers one. I'm sure that there's a lot of good that's done in those courses, but the language is apocalyptic. The language is revealing, isn't it? It shows you something about the way we see ourselves. That I am a brand, and what is a brand? It's something that is created in order to sell. That's a very interesting insight into the way that we construct identity, and I take those themes and others and try and show how identity is constructed in the modern world along those lines. And I contrast that with a way of thinking about identity that I think first came across in a book by Michael Hanby called Augustine and Modernity, where he has this really succinct but perhaps a little cumbersome term, doxological dispossession. And he reads Augustine's Confessions, and I think it's there in the Bible as well, in that passage where Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ, I no longer live, Christ lives in me. Okay, so you no longer live, Paul, but the life that I now live, so you do live, are you living or not? Where's this identity? Is it you, is it Christ? That passage. And Augustine talks in the Confessions about how he's scattered. He's a mess. He can't make sense of himself, which I think is a way of understanding ourselves that resonates especially in the late modern world. I'm a bag of irreconcilable, messy desires and impulses that don't particularly fit together in a neat way, thinks Augustine. And the way that he makes sense of himself is not by looking inside himself and trying to put the pieces together, but by looking outside of himself and praising God. And that's this idea of doxological dispossession. So it's an attitude of praise, looking away from oneself towards God, not trying to possess oneself. So it's getting away from this idea of possessive individualism. It's actually through dispossession that we come to know ourselves and to, as Paul puts it, to be found in Christ. And I think the more we think about that, the more we put that on, the more we get inside that idea as a biblical way of finding ourselves. By the grace of God, I am who I am would be another moment where this comes forth in the Bible. The more liberating, exciting, transcendent in the sense that it gets me outside myself. It connects me with a reality that is deeper and richer than myself. It connects me with a story that exalts me. It doesn't subsume me within some sort of alien story, but it enhances the story of my life and makes it part of something that's much bigger than I could have ever dreamed, never mind written myself into. And this idea of identity is just gold, basically. I think it's fantastic.